Hi there, welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing my just released Night Lights shawl. You know, before I started this, I just had a feeling that my dog was going to start barking, and he is. Hopefully you can't hear him. He's on, this is probably his high alert time. I don't know if you have a dog at home, but when we were growing up, we had a miniature dachshund named Little Bit because he was a little bit of a dog. And he would do the same thing. He had a certain time every day that he would be in front of the window, just high alert, barking. Anybody who would go by. Anyways, this is the Nightlight shawl. It is based on the pattern that I used for my night and day cowl that I released last year. And after knitting that, I knew I wanted a full-size shawl, and it did not disappoint. So this is it in all of its glory. I'll try and fit it in the frame. And this uses Harrisville nightshades, just like I used in the cowl. And this one, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see with this lighting, but it's dark, right? Oh, there, you can see it. But you see like the little, focus, the little beautiful hints of green in there. This color, I believe, is called VCR, and I think it might be my favorite. I loved the navy forever. That was like, had my heart. But this green, I want to do a whole sweater in that green. I love it. Anyways, and so what I did when I was picking the yarn for this shawl is the nightshades was easy. I had used it for the cowl. I really liked how it blocked out with this stitch pattern, which has some slip stitches. The woolly nature of this, I feel like just lets it block out really, really nice with that specific stitch pattern. So I started there and obviously was drawn into the green tones of it. So then I went over to my stash and pulled out some Spin Cycle Dream State, and I wanted to go for a color that pulled the green tones out from the dark moody nightshades. And so that is why I went with Light Years, which is one of my favorite colorways. I love Light Years and Deep Bump from Spin Cycle. They're both in that like minty bluish green zone, and I just really like them. So there it is. It is a DK to worsted weight shawl. I think that both yarns actually knit up at a very similar gauge, even though one's technically listed as a DK and one is listed as a worsted. And it was a delight. It was a delight to knit. And this is one of those ones that you could easily modify how big you make it by just decreasing sooner or later. Look at me just turning this into a little cowl situation, just full snuggle zone so that we can answer some questions. All right, so there it is. This is June's pattern, sneaking it in right at the end of the month. If you are a newsletter subscriber and you are watching this video on Friday, the 27th of June, then today's your last day to use your discount. So make sure to check your inbox because subscribers only get their special discount, and it expires tonight at midnight. So I'm gonna take a sip of water and we're gonna jump into some questions. Oh, that was a gulp. I wonder if you could hear it. I could hear it. It's like, Okay. Okay, we just watched Wonka last night, and I feel like everything should be a song right now. It's very tempting to sing these out. I am not going to, but in my brain it is. All right, this might be a silly question, but when you say go up or down a needle size, what does that actually mean in millimeters? Like if a pattern uses 3mm needles and you suggest going up a size, does that mean 3.25mm, or are we jumping all the way to 4mm? So this is a great question. I meant to have my little, how do I want to say this? I meant to have my little needle gauge right here so I could look at the difference because I don't have that all memorized. So I just pulled it up on the old interwebs. So yes, I apologize for just defaulting to US needle sizes. But I love that you asked this because it's such a great clarification. So when I say to go up or down a needle size, I am talking to the size just above or below the current one that you are using. So if you were using a 3.0 millimeter needle and you wanted to go up one size, I would only be going up to a 3.25. If you were to jump all the way to a 4, that's like a 4 needle size change. So yeah, really simply put, you're just going to the next one. Like if you have an interchangeable set, you would only be going to the next set up or down and starting there, unless your gauge is way off and you know you need to do a bigger jump than that. Generally speaking, like when I've talked about sleeves, for instance, most knitters knit tighter when they're doing small circumference as opposed to big circumference. So when we knit a sleeve, as compared to our body, we're going to tighten up on those sleeves. It just happens with small circumference knitting. So I often tell people, go up a needle size to make up for that change in your gauge, that change in your tension, and that will keep your gauge matching the body, so that your stitch size stays the same. So when I say to go up one needle size, let's say you are knitting it on a US 4 or 3.5 millimeter needle, I'm telling you to go up to a US 5 or 3.75 millimeter needle. So regardless of if you do US needle sizes or millimeter, only go to the next one unless you need a bigger jump. But I usually start small and go from there. So thanks for that question. Ooh, I have a little show and tell, and there are pins in it, and I am poking myself on it because I'm too talkative with my hands. All right, gotta get back to my questions here. Okay, so question number 2. I just knit the DRK Everyday Cardi, my first cardigan ever. Congratulations. I hope you love it. And then they say, and I absolutely love it. So I'm so thrilled that you love it. I want to make another one, but instead of a double thickness collar, only do a single. If I plan on having the collar folded down most of the time, do you think single thickness would be okay? And would I just knit half the amount of rows that the pattern calls for? Sure, absolutely. You would. The nice thing about it is I for that sweater really enjoyed the double thickness, but I can see what you're saying. If you're only ever going to wear it flat and maybe you don't want bulk there, maybe you want it to be a little like not as warm as a double thickness collar, whatever your reason, maybe just like how it looks better, then you can totally do that modification. Yeah, you want it to be half the height. So I think the height of that collar is maybe 7 inches, and then we fold it in half to give us 3.5, if memory serves. So you would just knit it to 3.5 inches. Okay. For some reason, oh, that's what else I wanted to say. Because you do ask in there, do I think it would be okay? And I do think it would be okay. And the nice thing is that that sweater is knit from the top down. So you can make sure it's okay for you by giving like a little steam block and trying it on maybe once you're through the yoke and making sure that you like that single thickness. But absolutely, I think it will look fine. And that's the only other thing. No, that's really all you're going to have to think about, because you're not changing the full length, so it doesn't change how many buttons and buttonholes you'll need. So pretty easy peasy modification. I say go for it. Question number 3. I'm a new sock knitter and love using Addie Crazy Trio Flexi Flips. Is that the name of those? I kind of want to look this up. Addie... That is a mouthful. Addie Crazy Flexi Flips. Is that it? Addie Crazy Trio. Crazy Trio Flexi Flips. I see. So I think it's because it's a pack of 3. Wow, they have all kinds of fun little things. It's been a while since I've gotten new knitting needles, and I have never tried the Flexis. I've always been curious, so it's fun to hear that you're enjoying them. I haven't tried them myself, but I do think that they would be really handy for double pointeds, especially depending on what you're knitting, there are times when it's nice to be able to have a curve in it instead of just these straight little sticks. So very cool. Anyways, it's fun. Check them out if you don't know what we're talking about. They look like they would be fun to try. But let's get back to the actual question here, which is about laddering. My question is, how do I avoid ladders? So what causes a ladder when we are knitting in the round on something like double pointeds, or it can happen with magic loop, is that there is this point in which our needles are kind of doing this, where we have to jump. And it affects our tension, and what we intuitively want to do to fix it when we start to see this ladder happening, which will be this gap of stitches, and it looks exactly, I don't have a good example of knitting. Oh, I have a swatch right here. Hold on, let me show you. If you're just like, wait, what is she talking about with laddering? I don't know what you mean. Okay, so let's make sure this is focusing on my little swatch. So it looks like that right there, that ladder, that line between our stitches. It looks like that, but instead of relaxing and going back together, it kind of stays that way. So from what I have experienced, and the best way I've found to fix this is intuitively what we try to do is we tighten up the very first stitch on the needle once we jump across our little gap. That's not where we want to pull. That can actually kind of exaggerate it. That's not where the tension issue is. So what we want to do is knit the first stitch just normally. When you knit the second stitch in on your tip, so think about, we have our double pointed needles, and pretend this is a knitting needle. And so I have one right here, and I'm jumping the gap, and I'm going to start knitting on this one. The first stitch, I'm just going to knit normal. The second stitch, I'm going to give an extra tug. Move that tug to the second stitch in, and that usually will fix the laddering issue. So give that a try. If anybody else has any other tricks they do, I will say I predominantly am a magic looper. I like the ease of the magic loop in the fact that I can have one set of needles, like my interchangeable needles, and I can do anything I want with those needles because I can just use them for magic loop, and then I don't have to carry around a set of double pointeds too. So it's just easier for me. And that also lessens the amount of jumps you might have in a project. So because with double pointeds, it looks like with the Flexi flips, you're only using 3 needles. So maybe it's on 2. So that actually, wouldn't that be the same amount of jumps as magic loop? It would just be the 2. Instead of if you're using like a set of 5 double pointeds and then you have 4 little gaps, so 4 opportunities to have laddering happen. But yeah, anyways, give that a go. Tug on the second stitch to tighten up any looseness that's happening and see if that fixes the problem for you. But if anybody else has any little tricks that they try out, please feel free to drop that in the comments below. All right, next question is about managing more than one chart at the same time. So I just started your morning ritual sweater in a beautiful boucle yarn as you did in your sample. There are 3 charts in the pattern, left and right and center. The 2 cable charts have a 6-row repeat, whereas the center chart is a 10-row. Do you have any suggestions or tricks for keeping track of different row repeats? Because of the texture of the yarn, I'm struggling to just simply count my rows. So this is when my little best friend, the row counter, comes into play. Or I would print off those charts and I would physically make little dots. So if this was my chart, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're just gonna pretend it's 4-row repeat. What I would do is I would have my 3 charts, or yeah, it is 3. You can see there's a right and a left and a center. So let's say this is another chart, this is another chart. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna simply take a pen and I'm gonna do a dot, 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 and now a new column, dot, 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 and pen and pencil to keep track. And I'm going to do that on both my 6 chart repeat and my 10. I would probably only need to draw it on one of those 6-row repeats because it's going to help me keep track. Your other option would be a row counter, and you could even, so what I would do if I have a 6-row repeat and I have a 10-row repeat and my pen's running out of ink. Oh, there's something kind of satisfying about running out of ink because I'm like, yes, I used it all up before it got lost or whatever. Thankfully, I have another pen right here. So what I would do, let's say you have to work 30 rows, okay? So you have 30 rows, and within that 30 rows, you have your 6-row chart and your 10-row chart. So I know I am going to have this is actually literally what I would do. So I was giving ideas, but now I'm going to tell you what I would do. And this is what I would do. So I would figure out the total rows that I'm probably going to need to work for this area. So I'm just throwing out a random number. I'm going to say 30. So I have a 10-row repeat and a 6-row repeat. So I would look at what row am I crossing cables on. Now, the nice thing about that pattern is that for both charts, the very first time you cross a cable, it is on the same row. It's on row 3 of all your charts. So that's going to be our first cable cross is on row 3. I'm writing this out because then I'm going to show you. You're going to see some really bad sketches, but hopefully this will all make sense. So row 3, we're going to cable cross across all of them. Now I'm going to look at my 10-row repeat. So I have 9 rows that have to be worked until I am going to cross that cable again. So if I do 9 plus 3, then the next time I'm going to cross that cable should be on row 12, right? Because we are going to do, or is it row, row 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Why am I counting it that way? Anyways, we're going to say row 12. Do you ever have that moment where like it almost makes me want to do this because I'm on the spot and I'm like, okay, am I thinking about that right? Because we would have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so it's going to be row 12. And then we have to do 9 again. So that is going to be row 21 and row 30. So what I did there is I just figured out what rows out of my 30 do I need to cross the center cable. And that is going to be rows 3, 12, 21, 30. Okay, so now let me go to my little cable, which is crossing the cable on every, I start on row 3, but then every 6th row after that is when I'm going to cross it again. So I have 5 clear rows and then I do it. So row 3 and then I'm going to work 5. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So on row 9, see, I did do that other one funny, didn't I? It's row 13. This is going to drive me bonkers because now I'm worried I'm going to tell you the wrong thing. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, sorry, I did. I knew I was saying something funny. All right, forgive me. That makes it so much easier, honestly. Add 10, Andrea, it's 10-row repeat. Okay, so now for this one, we're gonna start at 3, and then it's gonna be 9, and then it's gonna be 15, 21, 27. All right. So if you have a little row counter, I really like, I've shown on here, there's all kinds of them. I really like the Cocoa Knits one because it makes a clicking sound, which helps me know I did it. And you could also lock it, which is nice. So what I am going to do is I would just write myself a little note. So again, remember, I just pulled out a random number and said, oh, let's pretend there's 30 rows. So now I know that I'm going to cross my cable on row 3, row 13, and row 23. That's only my center cable. For my right and left cables, I know I'm going to cross those ones on row 3, row 9, row 15, 21, 27. So all I have to do is keep clicking my clicker and keep an eye on these rows I've already written down, and then I know, oh, okay, I just got to Row 9, do I do anything on this row? Oh yeah, I'm only gonna cross my cables on the right and left side. I don't have to worry about the center one. Oh, okay, now I'm on row 13. Oh, and I'm just looking at it. So I've just kind of written it out for myself. And I find that to be what's most intuitive for me. So I'll do that for a lot of things. If I'm doing sleeve decreases, a lot of times I will use a row counter. And let's say let's say you have to decrease every inch because you're working a top down sleeve. So I will first measure, okay, how long did it take me to reach 1 inch in between my decreases? Let's say it was 7 rows. So now I know, okay, I have to keep working 7 rows and then I can decrease again. So I might go through and say, okay, 7, and then depending on if it includes the decrease row when I measured, or if it's work 7 rows and then decrease, see, that's why I didn't do the first time. Maybe it's gonna be adding 8 if I'm if I want to include the actual row I'm going to decrease on. So I write on my little thing, okay, I'm going to decrease on row 7 and then row 15 and then row 23 and then blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to write them all down and then I can just check them off. I don't have to measure again. I don't have to think about it. If it is just plain stockinette, I could just count and say, okay, I worked my decrease and now I've worked 7 even. And now on this 8th row, I get to work another one. That's a great way to do it. If I'm doing that, I put locking stitch markers so they're really easy to see. But anyways, row counters are super helpful in that way. Woo! Lastly, what I will say is there are apps, counting apps, where you can actually have multiple counters going. So you could have one counter be for your 6th row repeat and you could have another counter for your 10 row repeat. And so you could be clicking along that way. If you want to have 2 separate row counters going. But that to me seems a little more fiddly than just quickly figuring out which rows I'm going to be crossing my cables on and just jotting them down. Even in my notebook, then you don't even have to print the whole thing if you don't want to. You just need a notebook and write down your rows and you're good to go. So that was a roundabout long way to get there. I hope you're still with me, and let's go on to the next question. Okay. I have been knitting for over 15 years, and I have been knitting daily for the last 6 years. It was only more recently that I have experienced aching and stiffness in my fingers. I suspect it is a combination of knitting with plant-based fibers lately and knitting on 2 cardigans flat. I think my purling rows are causing the issues. As knitting and design are a part of your job and hobby, what do you do to keep your digits happy and healthy? I've decided to take a break from knitting until my body tells me it's okay again. So I will say, I think something I do that I think is the most important part, which you're doing right now, is I don't ignore it. I have pushed through. I once was on a full travel day. I was traveling for hours and hours on a plane, and I really wanted to get this specific knit done, and I did not take any breaks. I just plowed through. And the rest of the week I could barely knit because I just overdid it and I strained my hand a little. Especially because I have some pain and aches that will kick up from my baking days actually, that I think cause more of the issues. So if I do any motion like that, sometimes it can happen when I'm spinning, and then it'll kind of trigger this deep ache and it's very uncomfortable. So I learned my lesson and I don't push through the pain. If I start to feel aching or stiffness, I rest it. And I think that's what's important, is not pushing through. Now, there are all kinds of great stretches, hand massages. I even have my friend who's a massage therapist turn me on to this little contraption that's weighted and you can push your arm through and it does this nice little massage, releasing the tension in those muscles. But I think instead of me giving advice, direct you to people who really know what they're talking about, specific to knitters and keeping their body happy. So there is the Knitting PT, who has great information, and then there's Ergo I Knit, who also has great information. Both of them, I think both of them are actually physical therapists and focusing on keeping our body healthy while we knit. So I will put, again, it's the Knitting PT and Ergo I Knit, and I know that Ergo I Knit also has a book. but I will give you some links to their Instagram and stuff like that, and you can check out the information they share because they really know what they're talking about. And I do think like doing some stretches, taking breaks, and not pushing through are all things to really help keep our hands healthy and happy. All right, that was the last one. So how about some show and tell? So I have really been missing sewing. I haven't sewn in a very long time, as I know some of you know, because I'll get some questions about what I like to sew every once in a while. But I just have not been able to prioritize it for the past year with moving and busy stuff with working, and sometimes I get on a spinning tear. You know, it's like knitting is always happening, but then I have to juggle the other hobbies. So anyways, I'm very, very excited to finally be back at it, and I am working on, this is actually the beginning. Oh, it got all wrinkly sitting in my lap, but do you see this is a pocket? So this is actually going to be for a pair of trousers. This is the left leg I am working on right now. And I'm really excited. This is leftover fabric from another project that I had in my stash, so it feels really good to do some stash busting. And I have had an eye on this pattern for a while. So the designer is Robert Woods, and I first came across them thanks to this amazing dress they do, and it has this motif. It's called bow, like a bow tie. But these are the trousers. And so while I was traveling, I stumbled upon this. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to make those so bad. And thankfully, my friend Alicia, who is an avid sewist and knitter, she's amazing. Pretty much all of her outfits that she posts on Instagram are sewn and knit. It's so fun. Great for inspiration. She also has a YouTube channel, so I will link her as well for anyone who is looking for some other people to check out here. And anyways, we're doing them together. So I needed a pal to jump in and keep me on track, keep me motivated, so that I could make time for it. Because that's what it is, right? It's making that choice and saying, okay, there's only so many hours in the day, so where am I gonna choose to put my time? And finally I was like, all right, I'm gonna get my studio cleared out in a way so that I can do it. It was a little crazy in here. You know, I promised a studio tour right after we moved, and it's just still, I haven't figured it out. It is, I would love an expert, somebody who does know how to organize spaces, to come in, because I know that this is not optimal. How everything I had to teach shortly after our move, and I feel like a lot of stuff was just like, boop, gotta go, and now it's still all like that. But it did feel really good to kind of clear out some space, and tucking into a sewing project has been so much fun, especially one that is like a little fiddly, to be honest, with all the piecing, but fiddly in the best way, where it's keeping me really engaged. So anyways, I can't wait to show you the full deal. The nice thing with sewing is, you know, I'll probably have these done in a couple days instead of weeks or months like knitting. But I'm really excited. And are you sewing anything lately? I would love to hear about it. Let me know your favorite current projects. If you are a sewist, shout them out in the comments below. So that's what I'm working on. I'm also working on a new cardigan that I'm knitting, and I'm really close to being done. I have a sleeve and a half left to go. So really excited about that. Playing with a beautiful yarn that is a blend am I gonna get it all right? I know that there's linen, there's cotton, I think there's some alpaca, and maybe some silk. It is from the Wandering Flock, and the colors are so good. And speaking of plant-based fibers, those can be hard on my hands too. This combo blend, not getting the hand pain. So really excited about it. I can't wait to be done with it. All right, I will leave you here. I hope to see you back next week. If you want to ask a question, you can find a link for asking questions below. And I hope that you have a lovely weekend. I hope you get to sneak in some time to fill up your craft bucket, get some making in there if you can, and have a great weekend. Bye.